So we have been talking about biomolecules. Basically, when we talk about biomolecules, we are referring to the major molecules, for example, here, macro, which are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and then the nucleic acids. All of us know that we get energy from carbohydrates, but they also provide us with structure support. We have different categories of carbohydrates, monosaccharides, disaccharides, and then the polysaccharides. And then there's the storage form in humans, that is glycogen. Then there's cellulose, which is formed in plants, and then there's sucrose, and then also glucose. These are basically examples of carbohydrate, which can fall under different categories. Okay, whether polysaccharides, monosaccharides, saccharides, disaccharides, and others. We'll have a session to look at the different classes of carbohydrates and their structures. And then lipids are usually the reservoir for energy. We use them for insulation. They're also important components of the cell membranes. We can categorize them as fats or oils. We also have steroids.
Okay.
And then protein, they provide us with the strong. We have proteins that help in transportation of the important molecules in the body, but also proteins are very important in communication, multiple signaling, and also in immune responses. So the proteins, their smallest unit are the amino acids, but we have also noted that we have enzymes which are basically proteins, antibodies, basically proteins. We also have structural proteins such as keratin. We also have hormones which are proteins, things like that. And then lastly, the nucleic acid, which are basically the DNA and then the RNA. We'll look at this also in detail, but basically the nucleic acids carry our genetic material. Okay, so for all those, the molecules that I've talked about, the proteins, the carbohydrates, and then the lipids, then the nucleic acid, they are basically made up of four major components or major elements: the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. So these are basically, for example, you will look at what we call the organization of organisms. Okay, you start with the atoms, and then you come to elements. Okay, so we are made. Our bodies are made up of those. So carbon, which is one of the predominant element, is actually very important. The chemistry that is actually concerned with carbon is what we call organic chemistry, which you must have looked at in your secondary level education. So it has unique capabilities. For example, it can combine with other organic molecules, and basically forms the backbone of organic molecules. It has the ability to combine with other four atoms for it to be stable. Okay, so that is carbon, which is the predominant element. So carbon forms bonds with other atoms. Like I've said, they can form after a maximum of 4 bonds. One of those types of bonds that is actually very key is what you call hydrogen bonding. With this, you have carbon and the other molecule combining through what we call a force of attraction that is usually created because of the difference in electronegativity. So there is a force. Now, hydrogen bonding is actually a force of attraction between 2 molecules. Okay, so it can be carbon and hydrogen. It can be with other elements. Okay, so for example, so we also have hydrogen bonds in hydrogen bonds in nucleic acids, which they attraction between those molecules, and this actually comes as a result of the difference in electronegativity. We also have what you call polar covalent bonds. Okay. In here, you have electrons being shared between two molecules, and therefore resulting into what you call polar molecules. Okay. Polar molecules basically are those that that have both the positive charge and the negative charge at one point. Okay, so usually polar molecules can dissolve in polar solvent. If you that's basically basic chemistry. We have talked about electronegativity. Perhaps you need to understand what it is. So you can have an atom that perhaps has a charge. Okay, this atom can have the ability to attract electrons towards itself. And as they attract these electrons, they form what we call a covalent bond. Okay, so electronegativity allows us to predict the chemical reactivity between molecules. Okay, and that is what I earlier on said that polar molecules dissolve in polar solutions. So we can basically predict that kind of reactivity. Okay, so electronegativity influences the chemical reactions of molecules, but also electronegativity plays a role in formation of what we call chemical bonding and in all the overall chemical structure of the given molecule.